Hi, everyone. It's clear that the role of CIO is changing dramatically, and mostly in a good way. The executive search firm Heidrick and Struggles has unique insights into those changes and synthesized some of them in its first U.S. Digital and Technology Officers Organization and Compensation Survey. We're going to dig into the findings as well as explore what companies are looking for in a CIO today and in the future, and what they're willing to pay for that talent. With me today is Katie Graham Shannon, Global Managing Partner in the Digital Officers and Technology Officers practices at Heidrick and Struggles. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, thank you, Beth. Appreciate the invite.
So this study caught my attention, and there's so many interesting things to dig into. But at the outset, the report says that digital and technology leaders' remit is increasingly broadening. So tell us more about the big picture ways in which the job has changed.
Sure. And I've been doing this a long time. I've been at Heidrick for 23 years. And I've been focused on this area, this function, the entire time I've been at Heidrick. So my aperture is long and wide. And I will try to compare it just in the last 5 years, what's changed in terms of the remit. I think more and more we're seeing this role report into the CEO. And so the reporting structure itself has changed, where historically the CEO reporting structure might have been around 40%. It's increased to, in many cases, we see it hovering around 60%. And then the rest used to be COO or CFO. I think we're continuing to see both of those be dominant in terms of that 40% that's left over. And then there might be some other reporting structure that is a smaller percentage. So the reporting structure is one, and with that comes a responsibility at the C-suite that is uniquely different than if you're a layer below. And that is to show up as a business person first to help run the company with the C-suite. And I think there's a couple things that are embedded in that. It's a level of communication at that level. It's also the financial aptitude or financial acumen to be able to address any kind of investments or business case around technology investments. I think that's also crystallized or sharpened in terms of expectations for this role. I'll just touch on a couple others that I think have also inherently gone with a broader responsibility. It's an ecosystem that is now touching all aspects of the business. It always did, but now it has the opportunity to potentially even create a revenue stream for the organization. So you tend to be tied closer to the customer than maybe historically this role used to be, and have an impact closer to revenue and growth than maybe it historically has.
Great points. I think that hopefully that is resonating with our attendees as they've seen some of their responsibilities broaden, and also serves as I don't know if it's a wake up call, but just as a reminder that if you are looking to grow into these roles, you need to have that financial acumen. You need to think about how you communicate and how you're creating value for the business. Great points. So from where you sit, what does the marketplace look like for CIOs right now?
I think it's never been better in a lot of ways. Like I talked about earlier, I think the opportunity to sit at the top. I know a number of these folks that have grown up in this function have been asking for that for a long time. I think this is the opportunity to sit in the C-suite and make an impact. We have watched organizations really look at this role as a transformational role across the company, not just a transformational role as modernizing the technology stack, but transforming the company itself. And I think this also impacts the culture of an organization. When someone comes in to help transform and leverage technology in ways that an organization hasn't historically done, it creates a bit of a culture shift. Doesn't mean you have to abandon what made you great, but it does mean that you have to open up to what will make you greater. And that does typically mean a culture shift so that the person coming into the organization that has these skills can make the impact that they need to make. And also those around them become versed in the types of things that they can leverage to change the game for themselves. I think we've watched these roles make a material impact in all aspects of the organization, but there's a couple that I think have shown up more than others in the last couple of years. If you think about the supply chain, I mean, we all went through COVID. We watched what happened with supply chain issues and how it crippled some companies. And I think that might have brought this to light for a lot of organizations on could they have done something differently. But there's definitely a lens on supply chain and operations. How do we operate more efficiently? How do we leverage technology in ways that makes us smart and able to pivot from an operational perspective so that we can meet the demands of our customers and delight our customers in the way that we hope to and that we promise to. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a back end piece that's really important to be able to modernize and transform. And then, of course, for many years, we've been talking about the customer experience that's directly tied to how you behave on the back end and how you operate. So I think it's both. It's really the front and the back end that we're seeing our clients ask for. And I think that's great because it gives the person sitting in these roles the ability to make an impact in such a wide ranging way. It really is cross-functional at this point.
Yeah. And let's add on to that, the thing that everybody's talking about, AI and Gen AI. There was a great question brought up in this report, and it was, who owns AI? So what did you find out about that?
So it's a great question. And I think it's not yet a static answer. I'm not sure it will ever be a static answer. It's evolving. Organizations are maturing and professionalizing how they use and see data and who even oversees it. So today, I think it's a bit blurred. I think depending on who you ask, you may get a different answer because data in many organizations is not yet a centralized function or one person's responsibility. I think that you will find that more often than not, the person leading technology for the organization does in fact own some portion of what might be considered AI. But I think it would be hard pressed to find anyone that says, I own it all.
Yeah, it crosses so many functions, and I think you're right to say it's really blurry right now. So one thing I'm wondering is, what should CIO candidates have on their resume with regard to AI to stand out? Is it that they're helping to shape strategy? Is it that they in fact do own it right now? Is it that they have managed pilot projects that have moved? What are you looking for? What are companies looking for as this becomes such an in-demand skill?
Yeah, anecdotally, I'll just share that the person that runs our AI practice at Heidrick spends a good portion of his time. Obviously, he gets paid to do the work, but he spends a good portion of his time actually educating C-suite executives, CEOs, and their direct reports on AI. So I think the first recommendation I would make is before you even write anything on your resumes, just get smart, stay curious, and really try to understand and keep up with where AI is going. One that gives you an opportunity to be able to make an impact with your fellow C-suite members and show up with opportunities for AI to play a role because you understand it. So I think in terms of the resume or what our clients are looking for is in fact someone who is staying abreast of where this is going. Because more often than not, if there isn't a centralized person that owns this, they are going to look to their head of technology for questions or opportunities to leverage AI. And someone who stands out as a person who has shown that their curiosity has led them to keep a pulse on where things are going is going to be critical. It comes up in every single one of my searches that I work on, that this person is asked about AI, and those that are not keeping up or reading about it, staying abreast of it, building relationships in the field, building relationships with the tech companies that are creating some of this. I think that they will find themselves, at the bottom of the list in terms of how that CEO or client would receive them as candidates.
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
talking from a search perspective, but just in the C-suite, I think it's going to be really important for this person to show up as a thought leader in this space.
Got it. So going back to what you found in the study, generally these findings show a really optimistic group, optimistic about having adequate funding and executive support, access to talent, and cultures that embrace change and transformation. So this indicates to me that job satisfaction should be decently high. Do you find that that's the case?
I think it's mixed, quite honestly. I think, we've just come out of COVID where a lot of people moved to places that they wanted to live and started to operate in a way that worked for them, worked for the organization. And some of that has changed. We're watching many of our clients move back to in office, either in office 3 days a week, 2 days a week. Some are asking for them to be in office even more than that. At one point, we were, the remit for when we were recruiting roles was, I don't care where they are, just as long as they get the job done. We don't hear that anymore. It's shifting really to, back in office. The reason I bring this up is it's created angst. It's created, a change in how you've structured your lives, how you've been working, and you're trying to sort of rework how you work. So job satisfaction, I think some of when we hear a lack of job satisfaction, it's connected to this change that people have just gone through with COVID and now coming out of COVID. I do think that I've never seen, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen a better time to be in this role. I think that there is funding, albeit like I talked about earlier with financial acumen, they're leaning on this person to develop business cases on why they should invest. But I think organizations are awake and know they have to invest in technology. They have to leverage technology and AI and machine learning and all these, great technologies that we have access to in order for them to be at the top of their game, in order for them to grow as an organization. So it's what I feel like heads of technologies have been asking for forever, and it's here. This is an opportunity to really play a very critical role in the C-suite, even on boards. We are watching a number of heads of technology, digital, security, AI step onto boards now because it needs to show up in the boardroom as well. So I think
Mhm.
there's no better time than right now. But back to your question around job satisfaction, I do think that we're being pulled in ways that do play a role in job satisfaction.
Yeah, and the word that comes up often is burnout because we know there's a lot on the CIO's plate, and as you mentioned, these responsibilities are growing. This remit is broadening. In addition to more responsibility, there's more regulation, and the stakes are rising. So, what does this survey or your own interactions with CIO candidates tell you about burnout?
I think burnout is real, but I also think it's up to us. I mean, great leaders delegate responsibility and build great leaders. And some of a person's burnout can be redefining what is it that I need to do and be part of, and what can I actually empower my team to do and develop them as leaders that ultimately takes some of that burnout away from me, engages your team in a way that they haven't been engaged before because they feel part of the big picture. They feel part of leadership. So I think that that's one that I talk to our placements about, or even setting someone up for success when we're bringing someone in, is what does the team look like underneath them? And what is this person like as a people leader? How do they develop talent? More often than not, those that are developing great talent underneath them wouldn't end up leaning on burnout themselves because they've learned how to delegate. They've learned how to empower other people and bring other people up.
That is great perspective, and really kind of takes that question and turns it into how somebody can use that as a strength, or take that burnout and think about how they delegate. Really great perspective. Okay, let's talk about money. With increased responsibilities, theoretically should come larger salaries and overall compensation. And the average 2022 base compensation for digital and technology officers in the United States, according to the survey, was $540,000. Well, the average total compensation, and that includes cash bonus and any equity or long-term incentives, was just under 1.9 million. So how is that trending, and what stood out to you when you looked at the compensation data?
Yeah, I think similar to what we said earlier, where the head of technology is moving into really a critical role in the C-suite, we're seeing organizations change compensation across the entire C-suite to be more in line with how the CEO is paid. I don't mean the dollar for dollar, but how their long-term or even their short-term compensation is, what metrics they're tied to. So I think we are seeing a shift in terms of the long-term compensation and the metrics that are connected to it. Especially as we venture, for the last several years, we've been working with organizations that are really trying to pivot and grow. And so you see a lot of, and this role is playing such a critical role in the growth of the organization, that it makes perfect sense that some of the long-term compensation would pivot to be connected to what you would see your peers in the C-suite have as part of their long-term compensation. I think we've seen the compensation grow as well over the last 5 years. And this is really across the board when I think of like the CISO, or the head of AI or data and analytics, or the head of technology and digital. All of those roles have pivoted in terms of compensation and what it's going to take. The other thing I would tell you is, historically, tech, because of the success that a number of tech organizations have had with their equity, and that same talent is being imported or exported into other industry sectors. Other industry sectors are trying to figure out, how do I embrace this talent that I may want to capitalize on, that grew up in the tech industry, but move them into, let's say, industrial or consumer. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, I've got to create a compensation that will be attractive enough to import that talent into the industry. So I think we're helping organizations understand that, what it costs to bring this kind of talent on board. I know that my colleagues that really specialize in CISO or AI spend a lot of time on the education upfront of compensation, and what you get when you go here versus what you get when you go there. And there are differences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating. What you're saying makes a lot of sense too. So are there other ways that contracts are changing? And here's for instance, I read that Gartner is predicting that by 2027, a quarter of CIOs will see their personal compensation linked to sustainable technology impact. So that was a new one for me. Are you seeing that now, or other examples of ways, in addition to what you just talked about, equity, et cetera, that contracts are changing?
Yeah, I haven't seen that explicitly called out. However, when we negotiate packages or when we get involved in compensation, we don't necessarily get involved deeply in the metrics that are tied to the short term or the long term. What I mean by that is they'll give us the specifics of what it's tied to, but embedded in there could be sustainability. We know that many of our clients, their success is tied to sustainability. So we know it's embedded somewhere in their compensation, but it hasn't showed up maybe as explicitly as it will. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it's interesting. And 2027 seems really close, and
Yeah.
to make a change that big. But we'll see. I find it really interesting, and the ways that uh, just the ways that performance is measured. It can reflect the values of the company too.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to pick up an annual report or even a letter to the shareholders in a publicly traded company and not see that called out very directly in that letter or in the annual report. So, of course, historically, you wouldn't have seen that before. You know, it's important. I think the way that some of our clients that are manufacturing and building product, it is core to what they're doing. It's in everything that you read about the organization. So you know that the organization itself is holding themselves accountable to sustainability metrics. And so I know it's tied to the compensation, but I haven't seen it explicitly called out as like a line item in a contract.
Mhm. So we have people in our audience today. They're aspiring CIOs, and we also have current CIOs who are looking for bigger jobs. So what's your advice for anyone wanting to position themselves for their next move?
I think understanding exactly what it is you want and being able to explicitly say that. I think in many cases it's available to you in your own organization if you know how to ask for it and know how to. So I'll give you a couple examples. When we've brought people into organizations, in many cases, the CEO is saying, "Listen, I would love to actually see this person as a viable succession plan to my role as a CEO." In most cases, not all, but in most cases, there are boxes that you just can't check when you came up through technology that would shift you over to a viable succession plan to a CEO. So if that person that I'm referring to wants to become the CEO, they have to define what those gaps are, and they have to get access to being able to lead in those ways so that they can be that viable succession plan. So I think the same thing when organizations are doing succession planning and you're talking about what's next, you're also defining a plan on how to get the skills that even get you to that next step.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Katie, we're wrapping up, and this has been a really fascinating conversation. What would be a key takeaway for our audience from the survey or from our conversation overall?
I'll go back to something I said earlier. I think there's no better time than now to be in this role. I think it is a joy to watch so many heads of technology, whatever the title might be, make such a serious impact in the organization that they're part of. And I love being able to be part of the world of search where I'm bringing some of those opportunities to people and matching really the right skill set and the right capability. But I think you're a business person. I know historically people always talk about, well, the tech and the business, but they're one and the same. And I think behaving that way and making an impact in that way is the opportunity that is front and center right now.
Great. Well, Katie, we will leave it there on that very optimistic and forward looking note. So I appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Beth.